Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Purely OCD. Sorry for the hiatus that we have taken, but there's been a few speed bumps in the way.
Life. Yeah, there
Yeah.
have been just a couple here
Yes.
or there.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so we're here today. We're going to be talking about pedophilia-themed OCD part 2, which is going to be us kind of going over mostly the compulsion aspect of that theme.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
After the unintentional cliffhanger that happened.
Yeah.
I realize now that, maybe everyone was waiting to hear about the compulsion side of things. It's a joke, but it's not a
Yeah.
particularly funny one. So here we are.
Here we are. Yes, it was.
Here we are. So yeah, how do we want to begin? Should we start with
Let's
maybe
let's
wow.
we're really smooth.
Let's get some
Yeah.
oil cans out.
Yeah.
So usually, and I think we talked about this when we talked about obsessions with POCD, that oftentimes compulsions are internal, right? They're covert because of the nature of these thoughts and because people's concerns about how they might be perceived and judged, or in some cases have people take action against them, right? Like even people on YouTube and on social media talking openly about it, that there's been some, I would say, really strange blowback around it at times.
Which really comes from a lack of, it's just ignorance, right? A lack of education and understanding of what OCD truly is. And that's one of the reasons why we're here to talk about it.
That's right. That is exactly why we're here to talk about it. So, yeah, in terms of the compulsions certainly just resisting the thoughts, right? Like thought stopping, trying to push them away comes up a fair amount.
Oh yeah, there's that. Do you want to focus mostly on the mental compulsions first? Is that where you're going? Okay.
Sure. One thing I will say too, to follow up on that, is some people watching might be like, well, of course I'm going to resist these thoughts because they're abhorrent to me. They're really upsetting to me, which is really true for everyone who struggles with this. And at the same token, just like many other subtypes where the thoughts may be abhorrent, the reality is that accepting their presence is the only thing that makes sense, because we cannot push them away. We cannot get rid of them.
Any thought.
Pick a thought, any thought. It is not going away.
Yeah.
No.
Absolutely. I'm glad you pointed that out. And I think in particular, this one, there's a lot of guilt and shame that comes with this. Is like, well, why is it that I got this version of OCD? I'd take any other version over that.
Totally.
And I think that then dips into a few things. One being that we're digging deeper into shame and guilt, which we don't need that. It's not earned or deserved in any respect. It only puts us in a harder place in terms of recovery. But two, being that then people will obsess on their own spiral of like, why me? And the thought itself becomes less bothersome, the original thought, and more of like, how do I get rid of this?
Yes. So oftentimes I think that there are a couple of different ways that this presents. And one of them is that it's almost like, okay, I can accept that these thoughts are going to come, but I don't want them to come as frequently. Or how do I stop them? Or how do I reduce them? Because they're impacting my life. Like they're detracting from my degree of enjoyment almost. And we see that a lot of the time with big events or special days, where it's like, well, it's my birthday. I don't want to have these thoughts on my birthday. Or, I mean, obviously it's in all different contexts, but it does. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I feel like the shame, I almost see like the shame and the why me on this content gets more stuck around, I have to get rid of this, right? Like you're saying, like the pushing of the thoughts away it's strong.
Yes,
The force
and
is
like
strong with this.
so strong, the force is so strong.
Yeah.
But it's almost like there's a moral imperative. Like
Yes.
who am I if I don't push
Y
this thought away?
exactly, like
Yeah.
that hyper responsibility
Totally.
aspect.
And I guess I kind of riffed off because obviously, if you're accepting it in some circumstances, maybe that's not as much consistent with the shame that you were talking about. However, there is this sort of branch where it is less about the shame and more about just like
Yeah.
this is ruining my mental space. Like
Mhm.
it's messing with my zen or whatever, right? It's
Yeah.
like get out of here. Um
Right.
so yeah,
So,
but
mental
I think,
compulsions.
but I want to say to your point though, like shame is a huge issue with this
Yeah.
because of the meaning that's given to thoughts, and we could probably do a whole episode on shame within this subtype and navigating that. To be honest, maybe it's worth doing a
And
full
maybe
four
we will.
part. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, so in terms of compulsions though,
yes,
um, I'm thinking of the big one is the avoidance, right? Like avoiding entirely of any children at all, whether it's in person, whether it's a playground, whether it's an image, maybe even talking about it, avoiding any shows around it, right? So
yes.
that's a pretty strong one.
Yes, just let's avoid it entirely and not get triggered in the first place is a very uh yes, common
Yes.
compulsive behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, Another one might be the reassurance giving, right? Like I'm giving tons of reassurance around the fact that I'm getting it from other people, right? Am I a bad person? Do you think I'm a bad person? Did I touch this child? Did I do something inappropriate? There might be a lot of mental retracing of just riffing off of that, right? Piggybacking off of that is like, did I actually have my hands out of my pocket?
Right.
What did I actually touch, right? Or even going into the restroom. This is actually a really common one, being like, oh, I pulled my pants down to use the restroom. And there was a child.
In
Did
the
I?
yeah, in some
Yeah.
area of the
Yeah.
restroom. Yeah.
And did I expose myself inappropriately, right?
Right. It's almost like because you have the image of a child and then you also have the recollection of like, dropping your pants to use the restroom or that
Yeah.
there is a concern that they may have happened simultaneously. Like, well, those memories happened in such close proximity. What does that mean? Does that mean something happened? Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that the mental review piece is really key. And to your point, the tendency for this subtype to dovetail with like false memory and anxiety about whether or not your memories are reliable is really common.
Yeah, and sufferers will even go back in time and be like, well, there was this one event when I was younger where maybe I was playing doctor or did something inappropriate, or did somebody do something inappropriate to me, which is why I have these thoughts. And they're trying to recount that. They're sharing it with other people to kind of get a gauge of, do other people think that I did
Yes.
something? Right.
Yes. And I think when they're not willing to talk about it, like because of the potential for judgment, that there's a lot of self-reassurance as well. Like
Yeah.
trying to
Oh, yeah. Like this is just OCD. This is just a thought, right? That's why when we're working with people, depending on how fused they are with that thought, and this is something part 3 will go into is our exposures, but just to touch, on it briefly, is that we want to, depending, like if they're very fused, we might be like, okay, this is OCD, you're coming to an OCD therapist, but eventually we're weaning them off of this idea of this is just a thought, right? Because that's inherently compulsive, and more saying, I notice I'm
yes.
thinking, which is more of this non-judgmental approach of like thinking, here's
Yeah,
thinking.
or here are automatic thoughts and getting out. I actually tend to like, I guess, frame it as, yeah, these are still thoughts, because they're anything that's happening in your mind are thoughts, but sort of labeling them as OCD thoughts, like it's like there's
Yeah. Means it's
right, it is.
neutralizing it in some
Yeah,
degree. Yeah.
oftentimes. And so, yeah, just saying like, look, I'm having this thought. It's a scary thought. I don't like that there is this possibility that something could happen, or something like may have happened and I maybe blacked it out. Like, is the likelihood high? No, it's not. But it's a possibility, because I can't
Mhm.
guarantee anything. And
Right.
I'm going to tolerate that feeling. I'm going to make space for it without trying to answer what it is, and whether or not I need to do anything about it.
Exactly.
Which is a tall order.
I
I mean, in all types of OCD.
I've tried all those things. It doesn't work.
It doesn't. No.
Yeah.
There are no guarantees, no matter how much time you dedicate. One thing I wanted to talk about too is that, because you were talking about avoidance, you were talking about mental review, and sometimes on a behavioral side, which it is a behavior, like it's a physical behavior, but nobody would necessarily notice it, is people might put their arms, like cross their arms, or they might put their hands in their pockets and hold on tight as a
Yeah.
form of trying to reassure themselves in the aftermath. Like, oh no, I remember, because I was clenching my fists really tightly in my pockets, so I couldn't have touched somebody
Right.
inappropriately, that kind of thing.
1000%. Yeah. That I have my hands in my pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
And groinal checking too. Well, that's like that's a very behavioral thing, but it's also matched with this idea of like, oh, I'm checking to see for arousal, but also mentally, am I aroused? Does that mean that I'm attracted to,
yeah.
children?
Yes. And you know what I think is really important that we acknowledge within that is that this disorder is so, as we know, like it folds in on itself. And sometimes people will come to treatment going, well, like, how do I know if I like the thoughts? What if I do like the thoughts? What if I
Yeah, I have
well,
arousal
and
when I
something
have that.
moved? What does that mean? Or like,
Right.
like there's some sort of change, or I sense something, and like, so the doubt starts to capitalize on this idea of, how do I know for sure that I'm not aroused? Or how do I know for sure that I'm not into this? And people are like, well, see, I'm not even sure about that. That must mean something. But the reality is we're still talking about doubt. We're still talking about uncertainty here.
Yep.
And it's like, but in a moment, maybe I do know. Again, still uncertainty, still we don't know.
Yeah.
Tricky
For sure. I'm trying to think of any other really common compulsions.
The only thing I would say is like analyze, like maybe mentally analyzing or ruminating about how one would know, right? So like sort of like trying to figure out in your mind, like, okay, well, is there a way I could know for sure? And what would that look like? And how, like, just again, trying to piece together some form of structure around which we can get certainty that this isn't me. This is not what I really want. This is not who I am. And I'm not going to harm somebody. So, and some of that, to your point earlier, is normal early on in treatment to say like, okay, rationally speaking, right? Like,
Right.
especially depending on how fused somebody is with the thoughts, like how strongly they are like, but that could be real, which, exists for most people to some greater or lesser extent. But saying, yeah, okay, well, if you don't have any clear evidence, right, like that would convince a jury, then we're gonna go, we don't know, and walk away.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think even with that, it leads to other compulsions like research, right? Even maybe I'm not saying that people that are here are compulsing, but I've definitely had many clients, which naturally so is like, what is pedophilia OCD? What are pedophiles? What are their symptoms? Right. So they're like trying to compare and really get certainty that this is OCD. Even many much into treatment, they might even do that, right? Like where they're trying to, just compulsively watch podcasts or read posts and being like, oh, okay, yes, that's right. This is OCD.
Which still keeps this trying to figure it out front and center in our lives, which is not what we want. We want to get back to living life with uncertainty. Well, usually when people come to treatment, they want to figure it out and then get on with living their lives. But given that that's not really a viable option or a helpful option, then we want to just continue on without our lives or throughout our lives. Wow, words.
Throughout our lives. Yeah.
Sometimes
Fine.
hard. Yeah. Oh, I was going to say something else, but I lost it. Is there anything else that was coming to mind for you?
I was going to say back to the groinal checking too, is that I think too, people will then go into this, I'm actually going to go out and check, right? Like I will intentionally bring up an image, or it wouldn't be like a natural trigger that would occur. It would be like, I am going to watch a show to intentionally try to see if I am aroused or having some type of arousal.
Totally.
Response.
And that may be a show with adults that,
Oh yeah, that too. Right. Yeah. Like someone they're attracted to, like, am I having a response to them? But I'm not. So that must then infer I am attracted to children.
Or, oh, I didn't, that feels nice. Right. Like, okay, I must really be attracted to the people that I think I'm attracted to. But the problem is that that's just a ping pong match, right? Like, cause there's going to be another physical sensation and you're going to want to figure out what that means. So unfortunately that element of like, yeah, sometimes it works, but like it ends up backfiring a lot of the time as well.
Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah. And just like I said, a lot of time spent devoted to thinking about something when we want you to be out living your life instead of like trying to figure out something that you don't actually need to figure out, in spite of the urgency that you may feel around it, which is intense.
Right. And the intense judgment of self for having this content in their readily available in their mind.
Yeah. Which, I think that there's a lot to be said for normalizing through acknowledging that we with OCD have very creative minds. We tend to have quite outlandish thoughts, but it is hard.
You're not alone.
You are not alone. And, your brain, you may find yourself getting angry at it from time to time, but the reality is that it has some amazing qualities that come alongside the ones that are maybe more challenging or that you dislike.
Yes, absolutely.
So, well, any other additions, thoughts? I'm sure there's plenty that, we leave on the table always, but
yes.
Well, go ahead.
I do think we should definitely do, maybe it's not a like long episode, but talk about the shame that does come with that and the layers of extra problems shame brings to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's spot on. I think we should absolutely do that. And do we want to plan to do exposures next and then talk about the shame, or vice versa?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
I guess we'll figure it out as we go.
Yeah.
All right on. Well, thanks for joining, and we look forward to seeing you next time.